Have you noticed something strange about Australian rugby this season? For the first time in years, the Australian teams are incredibly close to each other on the Super Rugby table. Sounds like good news, right? Well, not exactly. Because what looks like competition on the surface could actually be hiding a much bigger problem for the future of the Wallabies. And that problem is serious enough that incoming Wallabies coach Leskis should be very worried. Here's the shocking reality. With only 2 rounds left in the regular season, Australia's top 4 Super Rugby teams are separated by just 7 points. The Brumbies, Waratahs, Reds, and Western Force have spent the season taking points off each other. Competitive? Yes. Dominant? Not even close. While Australia's teams have been fighting among themselves, New Zealand's powerhouses have been operating on a completely different level. The Hurricanes have surged to the top with 50 points. The Chiefs are right behind them with 45. And together, they've already locked up the top 2 positions. Think about that for a moment. Australia's best teams are battling just to stay in the playoff race. New Zealand's best teams are already preparing for the finals. That's a massive difference. And it creates a nightmare scenario for Australian rugby. Because even if an Australian team makes the playoffs, chances are they'll have to travel to New Zealand. And history tells us exactly how that usually ends. Not well. In fact, no Australian side has consistently managed to beat New Zealand teams on New Zealand soil when it matters most. The statistics are brutal. The Brumbies, Australia's most successful team of recent years, have lost 4 straight semi-finals across the Tasman. 4. Every time they got close, the dream ended in New Zealand. And that's why what we're seeing right now isn't just a Super Rugby problem. It's a Wallabies problem. It's a national rugby problem. Because history shows a very clear pattern. Whenever Australian Super Rugby teams are strong, the Wallabies become strong too. And whenever the franchises struggle, the national team usually suffers as well. Let's go back through the years. In 2014, the Waratahs reached the Super Rugby final. They defeated the Brumbies in the semi-final, and then went on to beat the Crusaders in an unforgettable championship match. Australian rugby was flying. Confidence was everywhere. Momentum was building. Then just 1 year later, the Wallabies reached the World Cup final. Coincidence? Probably not. The national team was led by Michael Cheika, the same coach who had guided the Waratahs to Super Rugby glory. Many of the players already knew how to win together. They had confidence. They had chemistry. And most importantly, they believed they belonged at the top. Now let's go back even further. In 2011, the Reds won the Super Rugby title. That team became the foundation of the Wallabies squad under Robbie Deans. The result? Australia reached the World Cup semi-finals and finished 3rd in the world. Again, success at franchise level translated into success on the international stage. And if we travel all the way back to 2003, the pattern becomes even clearer. The Wallabies reached the World Cup final. The team was coached by Eddie Jones. And who formed the backbone of that squad? The mighty Brumbies. Players like George Gregan and Stephen Larkham had already built a winning culture through Super Rugby. That winning mentality carried into the gold jersey. So now the big question becomes obvious. Where is that winning culture today? Because right now, Australian rugby seems stuck in a cycle of mediocrity. No team is terrible, but no team looks truly elite either. They're all close together. They're all capable of beating each other. But none of them are striking fear into New Zealand opponents. And that's exactly what should concern Joe Schmidt and Leskis. Both men understand that successful national teams are usually built on successful club and provincial systems. You can't expect players to suddenly become world beaters at test level if they aren't consistently winning big matches throughout the year. That's not how elite sport works. The challenge becomes even bigger when you remember what happened in 2025. The current Wallabies player pool won just 5 of 15 test matches. 5 wins. 15 games. That's not the record of a team preparing to dominate world rugby. That's the record of a team searching for answers. And now Joe Schmidt must pick his first squad largely from the same group of players. Yes, there will be improvements. Yes, there will be new faces. But the reality remains the same. The Wallabies aren't suddenly getting a completely new generation of players. They're working with the same talent base, which means the environment around those players becomes critically important. That's why Australian fans should be desperately hoping one team catches fire in the coming week. Maybe it's the Brumbies. Maybe it's the Waratahs. Maybe another contender surprises everyone. But somebody needs to make a deep run. Somebody needs to prove that Australian rugby can still compete with the very best. Because if every Australian team exits early, the questions will only grow louder. Are the standards high enough? Is the player development system producing enough elite talent? Can Australia realistically challenge New Zealand and South Africa again? Or has the gap become too large? And that's what makes the final weeks of this Super Rugby season so fascinating. The table might look competitive. The matches might be entertaining. But beneath the excitement lies a much bigger story. A story about the future of the Wallabies. A story about whether Australian rugby is genuinely improving or simply treading water. And a story that Les Kiss will be watching very closely before he officially takes over the national team. Because his biggest challenge may not be selecting players. It may be changing an entire culture. Before we finish, let me know in the comments. Can an Australian team make a surprise run in this year's Super Rugby finals? And do you think Les Kiss can bring the Wallabies back to the top of world rugby? If you enjoyed this deep dive into Australian rugby, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest rugby analysis and breaking news. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Have you noticed something